In the opulent palace, where the mightiest pharaoh of his age resided, around 1245 BC, screams echoed from the royal chambers. A boy, his innocence stolen night after night, suffered in silence for something he never desired. Everyone in the palace tried to muffle the sounds of despair that pierced through the walls. In vain. The cries cut through the gilded silence, preventing any rest, as that terrifying moment repeated itself, night after night, in the darkness. Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe. The air hung heavy, thick with the scent of lotus and myrrh, yet beneath the fragrant oils, an unspoken stench permeated the palace, the stench of despair, of a grief so profound it curdled into something monstrous. Imagine a court, grand and opulent, where every whisper carried the weight of ancient power, and every shadow held a secret more disturbing than the last. In the heart of this empire, a pharaoh, whose very name commanded reverence, was consumed by a sorrow that twisted his soul. His beloved queen, the radiant light of his life, had been taken by the unforgiving sands of time, leaving behind an emptiness that echoed through the gilded halls. But this pharaoh, unwilling to surrender to the finality of death, conceived a plan so depraved, so utterly devoid of humanity, it would forever stain the annals of his reign. He would not simply mourn, he would replace, not with another queen, a living woman, but with a horrifying proxy, an innocent boy whose very essence would be stolen, his future brutally rewired to serve a dead woman's memory. Picture the scene. The royal chambers, once filled with the warmth of shared affection, now a mausoleum of memory. The pharaoh, lost in his tormented obsession, saw not a child, but a vessel, a living, breathing canvas upon which to paint the ghost of his lost love. This wasn't a tale of love enduring beyond the grave. It was a horrifying descent into a private hell, where power corrupted grief into an act of ultimate violation. A young boy, plucked from obscurity, his innocence a fragile thing against the relentless machinery of royal prerogative, was about to become the instrument of a madman's delusion. His childhood, his identity, his very body would be reshaped, not by his will, but by the overwhelming, suffocating force of a pharaoh's twisted sorrow. Every jewel adorning his new feminine form, every silken gown that draped his slight frame, every stroke of kohl upon his eyes, was not an embellishment but a brand, a mark of his horrifying transformation. He was to be a living phantom, a tangible echo of a beloved ghost, paraded through the very halls where the real queen once walked. This wasn't just a story of castration, it was the chilling account of a soul's deliberate eradication, a brutal metamorphosis designed to satisfy a pharaoh's unholy desire to cheat death. Prepare yourselves, for we are about to delve into the darkest corners of ancient power, where the line between grief and madness blurred, and an innocent life became the ultimate sacrifice. The queen, Neferet, had been the pharaoh's son, her beauty, legendary, her wisdom, revered. Her passing had plunged him into a darkness so profound, it threatened to consume his kingdom. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and the pharaoh's grief festered, transforming into a desperate, unholy ambition. He visited her tomb daily, not to mourn, but to commune with a delusion. He convinced himself that her spirit lingered, desperate to return, needing only a vessel pure enough, unmarked by the world's corruptions. And in his twisted mind, a child, devoid of physical maturity, became the terrifying answer. His gaze fell upon Kemet, a young boy from the temple grounds, barely past childhood, known for his delicate features and quiet demeanor. Kemet had served in the inner sanctum, attending to lesser deities, his life one of humble, devout routine. He had no inkling of the monstrous fate awaiting him. The pharaoh's decree was swift, absolute, and shrouded in secrecy. To the court, Kemet simply vanished, reassigned to a remote wing of the palace for a sacred duty. In truth, his life was about to be irrevocably shattered. The ancient practice, though not native to Egypt, had seeped into the fringes of their society through foreign influence. Under the cloak of night, away from prying eyes, the unspeakable act was performed, tearing away not just Kemet's physical self, but his very identity. He was no longer Kemet, he was to be remade, molded into a living shadow of the deceased queen. The screams that pierced the night, now understood, were not of simple pain, but of a soul being brutally rent asunder. The transformation began with the garments. No longer was Kemet allowed the simple linen kilts of a temple boy. Instead, he was draped in the finest, most delicate silks, woven with threads of gold and dyed in hues of deep indigo and emerald, colors favored by the late Queen Neferet. Jewelers, summoned in haste, fashioned necklaces, bracelets, and anklets identical to those the queen had worn, each piece heavy with precious stones that glittered, reflecting the flickering lamplight in Kemet's wide, fearful eyes. His once short, boyish hair was now adorned with intricate wigs, styled in the elaborate braided fashion of a royal woman, complete with a gilded uraeus, the cobra symbol of pharaonic power, perched menacingly over his brow. Each day, skilled attendants, their faces grim and silent, applied kohl to his eyes, reddened his lips with pigments, and smoothed fragrant oils into his skin, mimicking Neferet's beauty rituals. Kemet watched his own reflection vanish, replaced by the spectral image of a woman he had never known. Every mirror became a torture, a cruel reminder of the life that had been stripped from him. He was becoming a living doll, a macabre echo, a silent testament to a pharaoh's unraveling mind. The more he resembled the departed queen, the deeper he sank into the abyss of his stolen identity. The transition from the public spectacle to the horrifying intimacy of the royal bedchamber was the most brutal of Kemet's trials. This was not a space for affection or shared warmth, but a stage for the pharaoh's profound, unraveling grief. Night after night, the boy was commanded to lie beside the most powerful man in Egypt, forced to embody a spectral presence. The pharaoh, lost in a labyrinth of delusion, genuinely believed that by physically embracing this fragile, transformed vessel, he could somehow coax the soul of his beloved Neferet to linger, perhaps even return within the boy's pure form. Kemet was compelled to mimic the late queen's every gesture, her expressions, the very cadence of her breath. The pharaoh would whisper Neferet's name into the boy's ear, never Kemet's, demanding responses that echoed the departed queen's remembered voice. These were not acts of love, but chilling, ritualistic performances of a deep, deranged obsession. Kemet, stripped of his will, his name, and his very being, became a silent, unwilling actor in the pharaoh's macabre play. He endured the hollow caresses meant for a ghost, the suffocating weight of a dead woman's identity pressed upon his stolen body. The royal bedchamber, once a symbol of fertility, legacy, and the continuation of the pharaonic line, became for Kemet a living tomb, a space where the boundaries between life and death, reality and delusion, dissolved into a horrifying, indistinguishable haze. In the hushed darkness, under the oppressive weight of the pharaoh's madness, the last vestiges of Kemet's childhood withered, replaced by the ghost of a queen he could never truly be, trapped in a torment designed by a ruler too powerful to be questioned, too broken to be sane. Each sunrise brought no relief, only the dread of another night, another descent into a nightmare crafted from a dead queen's memory and a living boy's agony. The palace guards, the trusted servants, even the royal physicians, all knew the unspeakable secret, yet none dared defy the pharaoh's will, their silence a complicit veil over the unspeakable acts unfolding within those sacred walls. The pharaoh's obsession extended beyond the private torment of the bedchamber, bleeding into the sacred duties of the court. Kemet, now fully ensnared in the guise of Neferet, was forced to participate in elaborate rituals ostensibly designed to honor the deceased queen. These were not traditional mourning ceremonies. They were twisted rites, intended to bind her spirit to the living world through Kemet's presence. The boy was made to perform symbolic gestures of devotion to the gods, offering incense and libations as if he were the true queen, interceding for the kingdom. He was paraded through the temple complexes, an unsettling spectacle for all who witnessed it. Priests and nobles, their faces masks of piety, offered prostrations to this living effigy, knowing full well the horrific truth of his identity. The air would be thick with the smoke of offerings, the chanting of hymns, and the pervasive, unspoken dread. Each public appearance was a performance of unparalleled cruelty, forcing Kemet to embody the very grief that had consumed his own life. He was a puppet in a divine play, his movements dictated by the pharaoh's desperate yearning, his existence a continuous lie. The weight of the queen's jewels, the heavy, elaborate wigs, and the constant gaze of the court were a physical manifestation of the invisible chains that bound him, a boy transformed into a living monument to a dead woman's memory. The pharaoh believed these rituals brought him closer to Neferet, but in reality they only deepened the monstrous chasm between himself and any semblance of sanity, while simultaneously erasing the last vestiges of Kemet's true self. Despite the pharaoh's absolute power and his fervent attempts to shroud his grotesque obsession in secrecy, the truth, like a persistent plague, began to seep through the opulent walls of the palace. Whispers, thin as papyrus and sharp as obsidian blades, slithered through the servant quarters, crept along the hushed corridors, and inevitably reached the ears of the higher echelons of the court. Courtiers, masters of dissimulation, exchanged nervous glances, and their forced smiles became brittle, fragile masks, barely concealing their revulsion and fear. Even the most devout priests, whose duty bound them to serve the divine ruler, privately murmured about impious acts and the ominous portents they believed such a perversion would bring upon the land. The horrifying reality of Queen Neferet's return became an open secret, a chilling testament not only to the pharaoh's unchecked authority, but also to his spiraling descent into a profound, dangerous madness. No one, not a single soul within the vast, intricate network of the royal court dared to speak openly against the pharaoh. To do so would invite swift, excruciating retribution, a punishment that could range from banishment to a slow, agonizing demise. Yet the air within the palace was thick with a palpable unease, a suffocating silence born of terror rather than ignorance. The sight of Kemet, perpetually draped in the late queen's elaborate robes, his delicate features masked by cosmetics, moving like a haunted phantom through the gilded halls, unsettled even the most hardened and cynical officials. They saw not a resurrected queen, not a divine miracle, but a grotesque perversion, a living sacrifice to a ruler's pathological, insatiable grief. Their silence, therefore, was not one of blissful unawareness, but of chilling complicity, allowing the pharaoh's depravity to fester unchecked, an indelible stain upon the very foundation of the empire he ruled. This terror-induced silence became as much an unbreakable part of Kemet's gilded cage as the heavy, ornate garments he was compelled to wear and the phantom identity he was forced to embody. Every unsaid word, every averted gaze, added another link to the chains that bound the boy to his unspeakable torment. Within the gilded confines of the pharaoh's palace, a chilling narrative unfolded, shielded from the wider world but acutely felt by those trapped within its walls. Despite the pharaoh's absolute power and his fervent attempts to shroud his grotesque obsession in impenetrable secrecy, the truth, like a persistent and insidious plague, began to seep through the opulent chambers. Whispers, thin as papyrus and sharp as obsidian blades, slithered through the servant quarters, crept along the hushed corridors, and inevitably reached the ears of the higher echelons of the court. Courtiers, masters of dissimulation, exchanged nervous glances, their forced smiles becoming brittle, fragile masks barely concealing their profound revulsion and deepening fear. Even the most devout priests, whose sacred duty bound them to serve the divine ruler and maintain cosmic order, privately murmured about impious acts and the ominous portents they believed such a monstrous perversion would surely bring upon the land. The horrifying reality of Queen Neferet's return, the cruel masquerade of a boy made into a dead queen, became an open secret, a chilling testament not only to the pharaoh's unchecked authority, but also to his spiraling descent into a dangerous and irreversible madness. No one, not a single soul within the vast, intricate network of the royal court, dared to speak openly against the pharaoh's will. To do so would invite swift, excruciating retribution, a punishment that could range from immediate banishment to a slow, agonizing demise, ensuring no witnesses remained. Yet the air within the palace was thick with a palpable unease, a suffocating silence born of terror rather than blissful ignorance. The sight of Kemet, perpetually draped in the late queen's elaborate robes, his delicate features masked by heavy cosmetics, moving like a haunted phantom through the gilded halls, unsettled even the most hardened and cynical officials. They saw not a resurrected queen nor a divine miracle, but a grotesque perversion, a living sacrifice to a ruler's pathological, insatiable grief. Their silence, therefore, was not one of unawareness, but of chilling complicity, allowing the pharaoh's depravity to fester unchecked, an indelible stain upon the very foundation of the empire he ruled. This terror-induced silence became as much an unbreakable part of Kemet's gilded cage as the heavy, ornate garments he was compelled to wear, and the phantom identity he was relentlessly forced to embody. Every unsaid word, every averted gaze, every forced obeisance added another agonizing link to the chains that bound the boy to his unspeakable torment. He was a prisoner, not only of the pharaoh's madness, but of the entire court's fearful acquiescence. The pharaoh's obsession, once a private agony, began to cast a long, dark shadow over the very fabric of the kingdom. His focus, once directed towards matters of state, military campaigns and the prosperity of Egypt, now narrowed almost exclusively to the elaborate charade involving Kemet. The boy's existence, a constant reminder of his twisted grief, consumed his waking thoughts and haunted his restless nights. Important decisions languished, alliances faltered, and the welfare of his people slowly began to wane, overshadowed by the insatiable demands of his personal torment. The once vibrant court grew stagnant, suffocated by an atmosphere of fear and unspoken disapproval. Innovation was stifled, dissenting voices silenced, and the flow of information to the pharaoh became increasingly filtered, showing him only what he wished to see. Those who had once advised him with courage now offered only platitudes, afraid to upset the delicate balance of his deteriorating mind. The pharaoh's unholy pursuit of a dead queen's ghost through the brutalization of a living boy was not merely a personal tragedy, it was a contagion, slowly eroding the strength and stability of the entire empire. The gods themselves, it was whispered by the terrified populace, must surely be displeased by such an abomination. Omens were interpreted with renewed dread, whispers of divine wrath growing louder than the forced praises of the court. The reign, once marked by might, was now defined by a macabre dance with death, paid for with the stolen life and shattered innocence of one young boy and the increasingly uncertain future of an entire civilization. The consequences of such unnatural acts, history had always warned, were rarely confined to the perpetrator alone. The pharaoh, once a formidable ruler, was now a mere husk consumed by his unholy fixation. His once sharp mind, dulled by grief and delusion, spiraled further into madness. The boy, Kemet, had become a perpetual reflection of his own torment, an ever-present reminder of what he had lost and what he had so cruelly attempted to reclaim. Yet, with each passing day, the resemblance he sought grew less convincing, the living boy unable to fully replicate the essence of the dead queen. This growing dissonance only fueled the pharaoh's frustration, leading to darker, more desperate acts within the confines of his private chambers. His interactions with Kemet became less about a ritualistic communion with Neferet and more about a desperate struggle against the undeniable reality of death. The tenderness, however twisted, that he initially displayed towards the boy faded, replaced by a growing impatience and a chilling detachment. The lines of sanity blurred completely. He saw not a child, but a failed experiment, a vessel that could never truly contain the soul he so desperately craved. The once mighty ruler, who commanded armies and built monuments, was now trapped in a psychological prison of his own making, his empire slowly decaying around him as his grip on reality continued to loosen. The suffering of Kemet, once a means to an end, became an end in itself, a chilling testament to the absolute power of a king gone utterly mad. The pharaoh's descent into madness and his cruel obsession with Kemet could not last forever. Even the most absolute power eventually bends under the weight of its own corruption. The kingdom, once vibrant and formidable, now suffered under the pharaoh's neglect, his mind consumed by the spectral presence he had so brutally created. The murmurs of discontent grew louder, transforming from hushed whispers into a palpable undercurrent of unrest within the court and beyond. The pharaoh, increasingly isolated in his gilded prison of grief, failed to recognize the shifting tides, too lost in the mirror he forced Kemet to hold up. The exact circumstances of the pharaoh's end are lost to the sands of time, obscured by intentional omissions in official records, or perhaps simply consumed by the very chaos his reign created. Some accounts suggest a slow, agonizing decline, his body mirroring the decay of his mind, succumbing to an illness that no royal physician could cure, a physical manifestation of the spiritual sickness that had taken root within him. Others whisper of a more sudden, perhaps violent end, a palace coup orchestrated by frustrated advisors or ambitious rivals, finally breaking the silence of terror that had long protected him. It is said that in his final moments, his eyes, once filled with the cold fire of authority, were clouded by a desperate, tormented vision, perhaps still seeing the haunting image of Neferet reflected in Kemet's terrified gaze. The karmic justice, so often a core belief in the ancient world, demanded a reckoning. The tyrant who had inflicted such unspeakable suffering upon an innocent, who had perverted life and ritual for his own twisted desires, ultimately faced his own brutal reckoning alone in the darkness he had so carefully cultivated. As for Kemet, the boy who had been stripped of his name, his gender, and his very soul, his fate remains even more obscure. Once the pharaoh was gone, the monstrous charade collapsed. The court, eager to erase the stains of a mad king's reign, would have quickly dismantled the horrifying edifice of Neferet's return. The elaborate wigs, the heavy jewels, the silken robes, all would have been stripped away, symbols of a nightmare finally concluded. What then became of the boy? Did he regain his identity, or was his spirit irrevocably broken? It is unlikely he ever fully recovered. The trauma of his ritualistic mutilation, the years of enforced identity theft, and the psychological scars of being used as a living, breathing doll would have left an indelible mark. He may have been cast out, a silent, living reminder of a shameful period, forced to wander the fringes of society, forever marked by the perversion he endured. Or perhaps, in a grim act of mercy, he found release in the embrace of death, his tormented spirit finally finding peace after such unimaginable suffering. His story, though largely unrecorded by official history, serves as a chilling testament to the darkest abuses of power and the devastating cost of a ruler's unchecked madness. The legacy of this pharaoh, despite any grand monuments he may have commissioned, was ultimately one of infamy, a whispered cautionary tale of depravity and the desecration of human life. The screams that echoed from his royal chambers, the terror in Kemet's eyes, and the chilling silence of a complicit court, these are the true inscriptions carved into the stone of history. They remind us that even in the most ancient and majestic civilizations, the mechanics of power could be wielded not just for glory, but for unspeakable cruelty, transforming human beings into mere objects of a ruler's sick desire. And as the desert winds continue to scour the ancient land, they carry not just the dust of empires, but the lingering echoes of such tormented lives, a grim reminder that some shadows, once cast, can never truly be erased. The story of Kemet, the boy who became a queen, remains a haunting testament to the brutal, depraved side of power and the terrifying consequences when grief twists a ruler into a monster.